Okay, hello, and welcome to this eCampus News webinar, The Realities of AI in Higher Ed. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the Content Director for eCampus News, and I am happy you are joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is brought to you by Microsoft, the leading platform and productivity company for the mobile-first, cloud-first world. Its mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. In education, is to empower every student. Now, before we get to our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some features of the platform that we're using for the webinar. This event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. If you have a question or comment for the panel, please use the chat function. Feel free to use this also to contact someone from the eCampus News team if you have a technical question. And I do encourage everyone to please, if you have a thought or an idea or a question, it really helps to kind of bring the conversation along if the audience is involved. So now with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our conversation and some introductions. First, Dustin Ryan. Dustin is a data and AI specialist on the education team at Microsoft. He has worked in the business intelligence and analytics field since 2008, supporting school districts, departments of education, and higher education institutions in their execution of data-driven initiatives. Prior to his time at Microsoft, Dustin worked as a business intelligence consultant and trainer. He is also an author, contributor, and technical editor of books focused on business intelligence and analytics. Next, Melissa Hortman. Melissa is a senior industry executive with Microsoft who leads digital transformation and accelerating academic research across all of U.S. higher education. Previous to Microsoft, she spent over 12 years in higher education and was most recently an associate professor and director of instructional technology at the Medical University of South Carolina. Melissa is passionate about empowering faculty innovation and student resiliency to make higher education more agile and stronger during disruptions, both now and in the future. And last, certainly not least, Eason Selvin. Eason is a technology leader and industry strategist specializing in academic, medical, and education. He has transformed operational insights in patient research, academic achievement, institutional effectiveness, and inclusion and equity across his 22-year career. In his current role, Eason serves as the Academic Medical Center Industry Lead for institutions across the Western U.S. He has served in C-suites, industry associations, and inter-organizational partnerships, and is currently working to democratize the use of generative AI in ethical and socially empowering ways. So, folks, I just really appreciate your time and your insights. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Not to date myself, but I've been writing about business and technology since last century, and I cannot recall a topic as daunting, as exciting. For some, it's scary. The unknown. It's all out there, and I'm sure for each of you in your careers, you're always being asked these questions. And maybe I just want to start off because maybe 5 years ago, people at a cocktail party would maybe glaze over if you started talking about artificial intelligence. But now it's going to be the hot topic wherever you go. So maybe if we can start off by talking a little bit about what is your cocktail party definition of AI, specifically when it comes to higher ed. Some see it as a boogeyman, some see it as a savior. I mean, the analysis is all across the spectrum. Maybe, Eason, I'll put you on the hot seat first at the next cocktail party when you describe what you do and your efforts for generative AI.
Absolutely. So you're 100% correct in that, leading up to 2023, no one really wanted to hear about linear regression or cognitive solutions. And it's only really been since November of last year that everyone's talking about how their kids are out there writing papers with generative artificial intelligence, and people are playing Dungeons and Dragons with ChatGPT as a dungeon master. When I wind up having conversations with people, what they really want to know is, am I safe using it? What's the impact going to be on insert my industry? I wind up talking to a lot of professors. I wind up talking to a lot of educators, and they want to know, how's it going to fundamentally change the way that we do our jobs? And the pure answer from a technology company that publishes these tools is, we're finding that out with you. There isn't a normal yet. This is a very powerful tool, one of many in the artificial intelligence toolbox. And it's a really exciting, invigorating, and potentially exhausting time right now, discovering all of these possibilities together. I hope that's not too much of a cop-out answer.
No, it's certainly right on. Melissa, does that resonate with you?
It does. I have had more conversations with my parents about AI than I would like to. And I've learned a lot explaining what generative AI is to them, to then bring it back and talk to educators about that, because I myself, as a previous faculty member, was not familiar with AI in this sort of way. I knew that it was infused in some of the ed tech tools and kind of tertiary ways to my role, but now we're seeing it permeate across so many different areas, and the democratization of these very powerful tools to everyone has been a real kind of life changer for a lot of people in different ways, positive, scary, and negative ways. But I've seen so many amazing success stories from a lot of different walks of life leveraging these tools, that I see a bright future ahead. It's just getting there, right? Like anything, there's change with that, and a lot of change with something like this. We've seen the hype cycle actually already with AI multiple times in the past. This is just a new version of that. So what does this lead to? We don't know. I think we're still in it, but like Ethan said, we're figuring it out together. So I think that that's the fun part, is that's why we're here. We want to have these conversations. We want to learn from everyone, faculty, staff, students, administrators. What's going on? What are those pain points? What are those opportunities? And how do you see this as a potential, another tool in your tool belt to serve your students and impact and empower your students?
Yeah, and Dustin, I mean, specifically higher ed has some interesting aspects to this that maybe some other industries don't. I mean, you can go from, I mean, we're talking about the day-to-day use of AI in sort of administrative tasks, or just, plain old education tasks. And then you can go up the spectrum to where you're talking about deep research and some really kind of, when you get into those higher ed specialties, I mean, it can really get specific. Talk a little bit about how you see higher ed maybe being distinct and maybe even more of a exceptional example of the use of AI.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. And one of the things that has really struck me, just since this conversation of AI has become such a hot topic, seems like it all just kind of landed at the beginning of this year. Although this kind of advancement in technology, specifically artificial intelligence, has been happening for years, and now we've just kind of reached this inflection point where it seems like it's in the media every day. And one of the things that has struck me, Kevin, is the number of folks and the roles of folks in higher ed institutions that are reaching out proactively, inquiring about this. And so, it's not just the people that are, in IT. It's not just the really smart people working in research. It's not just the people with lots of technical expertise. It's, you've got teachers and faculty and support staff, and just everybody across the board wants to know, how is AI going to change their job, right? And to Melissa's point, we don't exactly know all of the answers yet, right? We're learning, we're figuring this out as we go. And I think, higher ed is specifically unique just because of the broad range of use cases. I mean, you've got use cases around, student life cycle, student success, of course. You've got departmental use cases. You got use cases, for, events and marketing and alumni relations. I mean, so the number of use cases are very, very broad. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that there are not areas of a higher ed institution that will not be impacted by this, right? This is going to change everything. And I've been talking with industry experts across Microsoft, across other organizations about this. And there are many folks who believe that this disruptive wave of AI that we're experiencing right now it could potentially even be more disruptive than the invention of the internet itself because of its impact to change everything that we're doing across education.
Yeah, maybe, again, in the technology itself is complicated and difficult for me to wrap my head around. It's also kind of the implementation of it, and Microsoft sits at a particular position to really take these theoretical technologies and make them into practical tools. I guess I'll ask each of you, maybe, or if Issa, maybe if you want to start off and talk a little bit about what is OpenAI and what is its relationship to the products and services that Microsoft is providing with the use of these things.
Yeah, so at its core, OpenAI is a company that Microsoft invested in some time ago, and not just invested financially in, but invested in from an engineering perspective in order to build out what are referred to as large language models. And without getting particularly scientific or complex, a large language model is able to predict a level of comprehension and interaction with a variety of different topics. Inside OpenAI, the company, they publish ChatGPT is the big popular one that everybody asks them, ask ChatGPT, write a poem about my spouse or whatever, make me a shopping list for a spaghetti dinner. There's also image models like DALL-E, as well as coding models like Codex. But I think the one that's really at the top of everyone's mind is ChatGPT. And what it does as an artificial intelligence product, which there are lots of other AI products. What it does from the OpenAI perspective is read documentation. It has the corpus of knowledge from the internet, circa, I believe, 2021. Dustin, you can check me on my math. I think that's when they finished building the model. And respond in as complex and as nuanced a fashion as you ask it to. And so part of what's really complicated about utilizing OpenAI is previously, in order to have access to some of these sets of knowledge and information, you had to at least be able to compose some kind of a Boolean search or write a piece of code that would come back with the information that you want. Now it's a matter of being able to be clear and concise in your natural language in order to generate a prompt that will result in the information that you're looking for.
I like it. Dustin, anything to add to that? Or did Ethan hit the nail on the head?
Yeah, no, I think Ethan nailed it, right. And when we talk about OpenAI and Microsoft's relationship, I think the work that we're doing together to not just, OpenAI is developing these cutting edge models and Microsoft has a leading cloud computing platform, right? And I think, bringing these two companies together is really great for everybody. Because now we can take the amazing work that we're working on with OpenAI and co-developing and researching together and bring that to an enterprise cloud platform where customers can deploy that technology, but in a safe and governed and managed environment. I think is the best way to be thinking about, well, how do we use these technologies? These kinds of technologies. There are things that we should be cautious about, right? And there was a question in the chat that I just happened to notice about, what about students cheating, right? And I think, Melissa and Eason probably could back me up on this. And I've been in enough conversations with Melissa and Eason to know that how they would respond to this. But this question comes up with every single conversation that we have with customers, or what are the things that we have to be aware of with OpenAI and using these kind of large language models. And I think that we're at an inflection point, right? And this can't be another calculator moment, right? Where the calculator is coming in the classroom and we're saying, hey, look, you can't have calculators in the classroom because you'll forget how to do math, and you won't have a calculator in your pocket when you work, and all those things. And now it's just expected that everybody has to know how to use calculators to do your job if you need that, right? And then in addition to that, right, to a degree, we've all got AI in our pocket, right? We've all got Siri or Google, right? Or somebody that we can ask questions to that can help us find those the answer to the questions that maybe we don't know just right off the top of our head, right? And so, we're at an inflection point. It can't just be another calculator moment, right? And I heard somebody describe it as you got a student that's sitting at a wooden table. A colleague of mine, MJ, gave me this example, and there's a nail on the table and you've got a hammer, and you're telling the student, don't use the hammer. I need you to push that nail into the table with your hand. And so we have to come up with strategy, right, for how do we help our customers be successful with AI, but also overcome the pitfalls. And that's part of what we're doing here at Microsoft, is working with our customers to figure out how do we help them adopt AI technology, how do we help them use it in a proactive and beneficial way, but also mitigate some of the complexities around having very intelligent AI capabilities potentially within the hands of students, with teachers, faculty, other types of folks. And we don't have all the answers to those questions yet, but it's something that we're working on. We know that it's going to be disruptive. We know it's going to play a role, I think, in institutions. We're trying to sort out some of those things.
I would love to segue off of Dustin's comment and answer a question in the chat about, curious how we see AI in the college classroom at this exact moment. The person asking the question in question is a writing instructor. How do we see AI playing into that? And, I worked in higher education for the vast majority of my career, only coming over to Microsoft 7 years ago. And it's been my experience that for all that industry is adopting these tools, and we see in energy and finance and manufacturing people adopting generative artificial intelligence, it has always been higher education that has taught us how to use the tools of the future, irrespective of what we're looking at. So when the steam engine came into play, when any number of revolutions happened, when the internet became a thing, it was always higher education and the experts in every field, whether we're talking liberal arts, engineering, business, that figured out, okay, this is what makes sense to us from an ethical and from a responsibility perspective, and will help us be most impactful in our field. So sir, when you ask me how I see this in the classroom, I see it as a very exciting moment for the educators inside higher education institutions and beyond to help us understand how will writers of the future use artificial intelligence in order to produce art and science and engineering, not because it won't happen, because we see it going out into industry right now, but how could it best happen? And how can your expertise as members of academe inform what we're doing from a technology perspective to build an equitable and inclusive future? Because we really do want everybody to be able to use these tools to amplify all the wonderful work that they're going to be doing coming out of their higher education experience, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and beyond.
Yeah, Melissa, as you see the other concerns that are coming in the comment in the question thread, talking about again some of these topics about AI having hallucinations and the accuracy of information that is being pulled out of these. Can you talk a little bit more about? And we were speaking about this before our conversation started, but like it is a tool, but it's not this kind of uber solution, right?
Yeah, there's still an element of the human that's needed in every single type of business, right? So even in sales, we have access to Copilot right now, but I like writing my emails. I feel like, when it's authentic and it comes from me, there's an element of human that will always be needed in every single degree, in every single domain. And the critical thinking aspect will never be lost. I think it's only going to be enhanced, because if there are hallucinations, if there is anything that happens or additions or edits, we're going to be more critical of what we see, of that misinformation, of the hallucinations, now than ever before. Any information that I get from any source, I'm looking at so critically. I'm triple checking, I'm researching, I'm doing more than I ever did, because I want to make sure that what I'm getting back is the truth, right? So there's a really kind of interesting element that I think is emerging here that is kind of amazing. I see the most successful institutions who are engaging their students as part of, they have a seat at the table. They are a stakeholder in this conversation and building out those policies, procedures, ethical implications of what this looks like in each domain, in each college, within an institution. And that's really powerful. Students have a voice in this too. And, if it's in their hands, how can we include them in the conversation? And then how can we teach them to think critically? In writing classes, especially, that they could go out and do that, sure, but there's a human element that can be lost in that, and that you can tell is lost in the writing. There's a critical thinking element that is lost in that. So I always go back to the why we're in education is to teach and learn and grow and to build lifelong learners, right? So by actually having this tool as part of your tool belt, you're doing that even more. You're empowering your students to understand the powerful technology that's out there, but also make sure that they're thinking critically on how they leverage any of these technologies that are out there.
Yeah, so I guess I should be careful what I ask for, because we're being lots of great questions and comments coming from the audience. I'm kind of weaving through them here, but here's one that I think is interesting that each of you can maybe talk to a little bit about. What recommendations do you have to help hesitant faculty members consider AI as an assistant in course development? Dustin, I'll throw that one at you first.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it begins with education, right? To understand, what are the capabilities of AI and what are the best ways to use AI, and with specific regards to large language learning models and kind of what Melissa was talking about earlier, right, with Copilot. One of the ways that we see AI being operationalized is being integrated with your modern tools. And so Microsoft, with our M365 platform and what we offer with PowerPoint and Excel and Word, which everybody more or less on the planet uses, right, to a degree. We're building Copilot into that so that, somebody who wants to quickly create a presentation can do that with Copilot. Somebody that wants help analyzing data in Excel can do that. Somebody who wants to, put together an outline in Word can do that very, very quickly. And so it will become a part of, the most modern tools that you're using. And so certainly I think being educated is really, really important. And I don't think that we're to the point, right, where, AI is going to replace people, right? It's not quite to that point, but Microsoft's approach really is, to Melissa's point earlier, right, people at the center of AI. And so, starting with, educating yourselves, learning what tools are available to you that you're currently using, excuse me, and then becoming familiar with those tools, I think is a great part, is a great way to start educating yourself. And I think that will also help with just addressing some of the, misconceptions about AI. I was on having a conversation the other day with somebody, and they said, "Oh, my boss thinks that, OpenAI is a plagiarism machine." That's an incorrect assumption about exactly how OpenAI works and what it does. And so I think probably the first step is to begin educating yourselves and understanding what exactly do these new cutting edge AI tools do, and how can I use them in an effective and ethical way.
So, Eason, I mean, this is really nothing more than a glorified spell check when it comes to AI technologies kind of being baked into 365, or the tools that we're already using on a day-to-day basis. I mean, another question came in about how will this affect kind of like back office administration? I mean, really, this is just something that maybe is a novelty to us now, but in a couple of years, we'll just be on to the next thing.
I mean, it's probably reductionist to the point of deception to say that we're talking about a glorified spell check, but I will say that there is similarity in that artificial intelligence at its best augments human cognitive capacity. It doesn't replace it. We're simply using silicon in order to strengthen what we would natively do with neurons, right? So the goal in incorporating Copilot, or in building your own Copilots, which if anyone followed Microsoft Build is probably going to be the ethos for the next several years at least, is to provide the large language models with information that they need in order to assist you as the pilot of the artificial intelligence, accomplish a task more easily. Does that mean that we should blindly let it take care of our compositions, that we should blindly let it write our curriculum, or that we should have it be responsible for organizing our class schedules, or any of the above? Probably not. And that's something that we need to work on. That's something where we need to figure out where are the applications where we can gain real value out of, applying a backhoe to a problem, and where do we maybe need to get a shovel out and still dig a little bit, and do the work that humans are meant to do at this point in time. I know that there is a large degree of distrust around what artificial intelligence, and particularly LLMs, are bringing back right now, in the form of things like hallucinations, in the form of things like referencing misinformation. And I think not only is a large part of our learning as we progress together, understanding how to fact check the artificial intelligence, part of it is actually using artificial intelligence to fact check artificial intelligence in adversarial networks. Because if you've ever worked with a GPT-4 or a Chat GPT, they come off sounding, because of the way they were trained, because of the kind of data they were trained on, they wind up coming off very confident. And it's actually possible for that same LLM to notice mistakes in the response of another LLM. So I'm not saying that's individually a silver bullet. I'm not saying that there aren't other things that we need to do in order to build trust in these applications as we use them to co-pilot our existences moving forward. But I am saying that there's a lot to learn and a lot to work with. And I'm really, really excited about what the next few years of partnership are going to look like as we move forward with the higher education community.
Yeah, so another interesting aspect, specifically of higher education, and I see it reflected in the conversations we're having here in the back channel, but as educators, as professors who have students in the classroom, there are a lot of concern about how to teach students to be able to critically think and communicate effectively and correctly if they are using technology to develop questions, answers, and essays. Melissa, maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
That's a tough area, because I think again, I would talk to the students, because the students are going to provide the best insight and value to what is the next step for this. How do we integrate this together into this curriculum? What does that look like? Communication and collaboration, technology is ingrained in those in some sort of capacity already. And so now it's just another thing in there. So how do we introduce this new tool in a safe and secure way, ensuring that our students understand it, but first ensuring that faculty understand it? So I think there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of amazing questions in the Q&A about how do I get started? How do my colleagues get started? The first thing that I did was learn about it. Go out and learn everything you can. There are free learning paths from Microsoft has free learning ones that I went through that are for 101 level. That's all I needed. I just needed to understand what this landscape was and how is it going to affect me. I have to make that translation because it's in so many different domains, but go out and learn. Take the time to learn about it and then bring it to your class. Have them learn about it. Have them go through the learning paths. There's also certification. There's other higher level things that you can do, but learn about it. That's the biggest thing right now, is just making sure that you're well educated on all of the different ways that this is impacting, what it means, what is a large language model, like Ethan said. You don't have to know the technical side of it, but what is this? What is it doing? Why does a hallucination happen? What are the pieces of data training? What does that look like? What does this mean for me in my class, and then for me in my institution? And so I am really proud of Microsoft for kind of taking a step back and saying we're putting the human at the center, like Dustin said, and we're leading in an ethical sort of way. And we're learning, we're discovering, and we're kind of opening the doors slowly to a lot of these very powerful tools because we're not sure of the implications of it. It's the same in the classroom. So take that sort of responsible AI. We have a whole actually learning path on that. If you do learn about large language models, also learn about responsible AI and the work that's happening there. There's a whole area there that we can dive into, because that, I think, as well will help you understand and again translate to the classroom.
Yeah, a couple questions coming in. Most of you had mentioned, well, first of all, your comment is getting a lot of positive response in terms of learn it first, learn it yourself, and that will kind of take away probably a lot of the anxieties. But a couple of people asking if any of the panelists know about specific certification programs that folks can get, specifically when it comes, I know there's one person here is a librarian asking for specific certification, or are we not there yet?
No, there are great certifications available. So anybody can go over to learn.microsoft.com, and learn.microsoft.com is our self-paced learning resource. And so you have great training, great learning resources available to you, whether you want to learn about AI, whether you want to learn about, cybersecurity, or you want to learn about, data platform, or, who knows what it could be, right? And there are great AI focused learning paths on learn.microsoft.com. And so if you want to learn about generative AI and, how do you use OpenAI, there's a path for that, right? If you want to learn about computer vision, if you want to learn about natural language processing, if you want to learn about, real-time language translation, there are modules within those learning paths focused on those specific areas. And so if you're somebody who's brand new and maybe you've just learned about AI and you're like, hey, I want to start getting in this field, the great thing about the learning path is that it starts you at kind of square one. You don't have to know a whole lot, and then it kind of progresses you through that. The really nice thing about the learning paths is that there are certifications that are aligned with that. So if you complete that learning path, that has prepared you to take that certification. Once you take that certification, right, that exam, then you can work towards that certification, that professional certification, and then take that to, your organization or wherever you want to work at.
Great. And I think we didn't get to this, but to go outside of the classroom now and back into kind of maybe when we're looking at some of the higher level applications of AI in institutes of higher learning, maybe we can dig a little deeper into how you see those tools impacting, say, research and development. Eason, maybe I'll throw that one at you. I mean, as we get deeper into the R&D and deeper into some of the higher education applications, is there a difference? Is there a distinction?
Sorry, not used to Zoom and I have myself on mute. Absolutely. So again, we're talking about tools that amplify the cognitive abilities of those who use them appropriately. There is something sublimely Socratic about the use of a large language model in order to discover things, in that you have to know the right questions in order to get the right answer back. There's an old computer programming adage, garbage in, garbage out. Right? Where if you're not putting the right question in, or you're not querying the right information, then you're not going to get a relevant response, or you'll get maybe even an openly deceptive response. So that one of the things that I think is really important to distinguish about Azure OpenAI and maybe in the education of future researchers and future scientists about the application of large language models is how to contain or rather how to constrain the information that's being queried so that you're sure that you're bringing back the right information to the research project in question. That is one distinction surrounding Azure OpenAI as it exists as an educational platform and as a model. And I think there's a slide on this where we talk about when you use OpenAI inside, when you use a large language model, GPT 3.5, for example, inside of your Microsoft Azure subscription, the information that you put in from a prompt perspective does not become a part of the large language model. You are capable of constraining the responses coming back from the LLM to a corpus of documents, whether it be something out of PubMed or something out of Nature or whatever series of articles that you feel like querying. So you can actually take what you think are industry relevant, field relevant articles to your specific field study and ask the LLM to simply respond back from that information. And that's really powerful when you start talking about being able to bring large amounts of data back to researchers in an efficient and expedient fashion. Furthermore, in a research context, when you're using OpenAI in the Azure cloud, should you take all of your data and train a model of your own that is capable of giving you information about atrial fibrillation or tensile strength of various different materials, whatever your field of study is, that LLM that you create inside of Azure, the model that you've tuned, belongs to you and your institution. It is not the property of Microsoft. It is not the property of OpenAI or any other company. In the field of research, it's kind of critically important that you're able to take all of your data and put it into a place that you can utilize it or open source it to the world if it's something that benefits humanity. And then I guess finally, from a research perspective, it's important to know that any of the security instantiations, and we don't have to talk about firewalls or network segmentation or any of the things that are important in a big three acronym regulated industry research group, NSF, NIH, whatever. But you're capable of following those compliance regulations in order to bring information back to you more quickly and efficiently. You discover new insights, the time to publish goes down. And honestly, as I talk with researchers across the country about how they use it, a lot of research that people want to do is on the efficacy of large language models, is on the verifiability and the accuracy of the responses that they get back. So there's almost a meta level of research that can happen there as well, and will probably have to happen for the immediate foreseeable future in order to do exactly what I was talking about before, is put some of these tools out into the fields that you're training human beings to go do.
So you're basically, you can create your own walled garden of data from which you can plumb, right? Is that what you're
That's exactly
saying,
right.
basically? Yeah.
And you can create models that are then able to inform questions that you didn't know you had in the first place.
Great. Again, I'm just watching the ticker here of questions and comments. It's really terrific. Here's another one that just came in. I'm curious about how a student or I would source content gathered from artificial intelligence. This person is in the architecture field and is excited about how AI can be used by students to explore things like facade design, similar to the same way they currently do with Google or Pinterest. Will there be a standard way for students to source their research similar to the way they would with, say, MLA? Dan, maybe I'll toss that one to you. Dustin, sorry.
That's a great question, and that's something I don't really have the answer to. I will say that if you I did see another question that was in there that was about, well, how do you verify what OpenAI or some other generative AI is telling you? How do you understand what is the reference for that answer, right? So we need to verify, of course, what we're getting back from things like large language models. But one of the things that Microsoft has done, and maybe you've already experienced this, if you've gone out to the new Bing.com, and you've played with the chat feature, right? You can have a conversation with Bing, right? With the scope of searching the internet for content. And one of the things that Bing does is that when you ask a question about, like, teach me the history of the American Revolution, right? Bing will do that, right? It will respond to you in a conversation, and it'll give you some background history and give you important dates and events and all those kinds of things. But one of the things that it does is it actually gives you references, so you can see what is the basis for that answer, as opposed to just, trusting it blindly and then trying to figure out, okay, well, is whatever it told me actually what happened during the American Revolution, right? You can go back and see that, okay, well, maybe it, answered this article from, the Smithsonian Institute, and maybe it, had another reference to, National Geographic. I'm just making up examples here, but you get the idea, right? It provides the references. And so you, as a user of AI, could trust but verify and say, okay, let's see exactly where it's coming up with this information. And and part of that goes, to the balance of, creativity, but also fact-based response, right? Hallucination is good in some things, and in other things it's less desirable, right? And so we want to ensure that we mitigate that and we use AI in an appropriate way so that we can still take advantage of the creative aspects of that. But of course, if we're asking questions about what has actually happened in the past, we don't want it to make things up about, historical events.
Right. Right. But maybe this is a case where we as humans just need to become more acclimated to this, almost in the way that if you turn on the television, you can instantly recognize an infomercial from maybe just kind of some general content, right, Melissa? I mean, is that something where we'll just become more savvy to the use of these tools in terms of the content that's being delivered to us?
Potentially. I think that's one of the really interesting things about the large language models and how they're being fine-tuned and trained, and the amount of information that's going into them. And the parameters are just exponentially increasing. So they're getting better and better. Think of them as kind of human neurons. We're reaching, they call it human parity almost, right? So the uniqueness might not be able to be identified. But those hallucinations could be identified because they're not true, obviously, with critical thinking and research done on them. I think going back to what Ethan said about creating that kind of walled garden keeps those parameters safe, keeps you innovating, keeps you thinking about and using these tools in a safe space. Especially in higher education and education in general, we want to make sure that our students, faculty, staff, everyone is safe. The information that they're putting or asking anywhere is safe. And having that walled garden is a great opportunity for people to continue to use these tools in a safe way. So I think that human parity level, we don't know how many parameters at this point. They haven't released it with GPT next version. We're just getting more and more and exponentially increasing. So the neurological sort of links that we're creating is getting closer and closer. So yeah, I think, we've got to think about what does this future look like as that human parity is reached.
Yeah.
And just to tag onto that, Kevin, this is actually too an area where Microsoft is doing a lot of work, right? And like your initial question about like, will it be easier to spot, right, if there's some sort of an issue, right? Just like, the difference between an infomercial and then like whatever the television show. And like, that's true for some folks. It's not true for everybody though, right? And that's why we have, we still, are worried about things like, my grandmother calling me about asking me, she got an email from Discover about her bill is past due. And then she calls me and she says, but Dustin, I don't have a Discover card. I'm like, just delete it. You don't have to worry about it. She's like, but they're going to report me to the IRS. I'm like, no, they're not. Just delete it. Right. So some people still fall for those kinds of things. And so, but this is an area where Microsoft is doing a lot of, Kevin raising your hand. This is an area where, where we're doing a lot of work, right, to kind of combat those things. And you'll notice it, right? AI capabilities, right? Like in the tools that you probably already use today. So if you use Outlook today, you know how Outlook will sometimes try to finish your sentence for you, right? You're in there, you type in a sentence and it says, oh, I think you're going to say, thanks, have a nice day. And right. And it pops up, you just hit enter, right? And you get the rest of the sentence, right? Yeah. But you also get suggestions about things like, hey, this email's from an external source. You've never had an email from this person. It looks like it says irs.gov. I'm just making up an example here, but the email address does not align with what the title is, right? So it's AI is telling you, right? Even if you have maybe missed it, it's telling you, hey, there's an issue here that could potentially be a problem. You need to be aware. And so Microsoft is investing in tools and technologies. And that's why in 2017, Microsoft began our responsible AI journey. And Microsoft's principles for responsible AI are really focused on kind of 6 key areas. It's around privacy and security, inclusivity, accountability, transparency, fairness, reliability, and safety. And so those are the 6 guiding principles for everything that we do in AI. And certainly we want to help people, right? As you mentioned earlier, right? Our mission as a company, right, is to help every organization on the planet achieve more, right? In the context of education, right? It's students and faculty and staff and institutions and researchers and everybody that is within that education ecosystem. We want them to be successful. And the reason that we've established these principles for ethical AI is to guide us as we're developing, as we're operationalizing, as we're helping our customers use these technologies. And so it's not just kind of these 6 principles as just a way to virtue signal about, hey, this is what we're doing, but we're actually taking concrete steps to create building blocks to enable those principles. And those building blocks are around how you govern the tools, how you administer those tools, what are the rules for using those tools, what training and best practices do we provide to our customers so they can be successful with that and understand, hey, what's the best way to use this technology, and then the tools and processes that help you actually use those things. And so this is an area where Microsoft is actually investing really heavily. We're doing a lot of hard thinking about how do we help our customers and our partners and the folks that we work with to be successful with these technologies, but also be safe and ethical and smart about the way that they use them.
Fantastic stuff. Along those lines, another question that's come in, one of the audience members works in institutional research and effectiveness. So they oversee the data policy and procedures, et cetera, for the college. They're wondering, in regards to data integrity and information integrity, how to navigate this in terms of putting together policies for the use of these tools at their institution. I think that's a really good question. Eason, I'll toss that one at you first.
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Could you please repeat yourself?
We were talking about the creation of policy, and Dustin was talking about the 6 guiding principles and putting together kind of a code of ethics, as you'd say. And one of the audience members was also talking about how they're putting the policies together for their own institution and how to put together language where you can effectively implement these tools ethically into curricula, just in terms of developing policy around it.
So I think a fundamental thing to understand is, while we talk about artificial intelligence as being intelligence, and I'm sure that there's some, cognitive scientists and neurolinguists on the line that would love to talk about what the nature of intelligence actually is. Artificial intelligence is a fundamentally non-anthropomorphic thing. To identify it with being somehow abiding by our state of ethics or our state of moral understanding is an error. It's an error to start that way. I think that the place, and higher education is really good at this, the place that you start with understanding what your ethical policy, what your responsible use policy looks like, is in the halls of your administration, is in the dean's office, is with the chairs of your organizations to understand the mission of your particular discipline. There is tooling that exists inside Azure OpenAI that allows you to filter for things that are not coming back according to your policies on ethics or responsible use. There are mechanisms inside the Azure OpenAI platform that allow for the intervention against prompts and responses that are irresponsible, that could cause harm to other people. And understanding, going back to the training that Melissa and Dustin talked about at the early part of the conversation, understanding what those technical capabilities are in the context of the mission and values of your organization allows you to execute against very specific and strategic steps. And then I guess the final point that I would make is, it's never done. As we train more of the model, as we begin applying in more places, it's not that you come to a policy and that's it, we figured it out. It's a state of constant introspection to make sure that the LLM isn't turning back something that's biased, that anything that you're training against isn't inadvertently selecting for correlations as opposed to causations. Working in academic medicine, there are any number of studies that I could cite where disenfranchised groups were receiving inequitable care as a result of poor calculations on the part of a machine learning model. So when we go in and do these things, part of the education that we need to be providing to students is, number one, we sat down and thought about this before we started doing it. And number two, we're continuing to review and continuing to evaluate our process as we move forward, because as our use cases grow, so does the opportunity for the intensity of the application, but also so does the risk of inherently introducing irresponsible use and bias.
I want to add to that because I think that that's a really important point, that disruptive sort of technologies may have been accelerated over these past 2 semesters. So building those policies and making sure that those policies can grow and change is a really good start. But a lot of successful institutions that I've worked with have built kind of this agility group for change management, because again, we know things are going to continue to change. So how do we kind of onboard or think about or talk about at our institutions specific technologies or changes that might happen? And so this has really kind of brought to light some of those opportunities to bring, again, all those stakeholders, like I talked about earlier, to the table to talk about these things continually. How often do we have town halls? Who needs to be invited? How often do we need to look at policies? So it's not just writing the policy itself around like the ethical use of it and the implementation of it, but it's building kind of this process, change management process that's always moving your institution along, because there's always going to be something new. Who knows what's next? I don't, but I have a feeling this is not the end. And if the pandemic taught us anything, we need to be agile. And so how do we create sustainable practices, sustainable committees? Everybody needs another committee in higher ed. Sustainable committees to be able to move along quickly when these sort of things happen. How do we mobilize? In November, October, when this came out last year, ChatGPT came out, no one was talking about it, right? But it was being used. And then we see the pervasive use of it over the past spring semester. This summer, now it's settling and we're kind of like, okay, now we can catch up. We need to be proactive about these things in higher education, not from a singular technology standpoint, but from an overall, how do we look at change? How do we as an institution mobilize to change when this happens again? Hopefully not soon, because we don't need another disruption.
To your point about disruption, Melissa, which I love talking disruption with you. You know how long it took to get 100 million monthly active users on TikTok, one of the more disruptive platforms that we've seen in history, right? How long was that? 9 months. And it took the world by storm. Do you know how long it took to get 100 million monthly active users globally of OpenAI ChatGPT? Less than 2. We're talking like 45 days or 50 days or something like that. It's the need to reevaluate ourselves is based on the number of users that we have, and the number of users that we have is coming on harder and faster than anything I've seen in my entire technology career.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ethan. Since we're talking about disruption, right? OpenAI and generative AI and just it being pushed to the forefront, incredibly disruptive. And I think one of the things that we're going to see is a separation between organizations that are prepared to take advantage of that technology and then organizations that are not, right? And we kind of experienced this a little bit during the COVID pandemic too. Part of my job is to help our customers be successful with things like digital transformation, right? And so at the beginning of the pandemic, you've got everybody shifting to remote learning, right? People leaving the classroom, and now we've got to deliver curriculum via Zoom and Teams and all these things, right? And you've got organizations on one hand who are prepared for that, right? They've got infrastructure, they've got processes, they've got technology in place to help them be successful at that. Then on the other hand, you have organizations that didn't even have a cloud strategy who are now trying to figure out, well, how are we going to do this, right? And then they're finding themselves in a bad spot. And I think AI is similar in that regard, right? We're at an inflection point for disruption, right? There are organizations who have thought about things like, how do I help my users be successful with data? How do I process data in a centralized and trusted way? How do I make sure that people have access to the best data set? How do I make sure that they know that they're looking at the most up-to-date data within their organization? Those organizations who have thought about those things are going to be in really good position to leverage AI. We talked about it earlier, right? You can't have good AI without good data. And if an organization hasn't thought about those things yet, and they're like, okay, well, maybe we should think about like, how do we really get our data estate in shape? Like, now's the time to do that, because every moment that an organization is kind of pushing that off and waiting, like, okay, we don't have money for this, or it's not a priority, or all these kinds of things, there is an opportunity cost that is lost for that, right? And so those organizations that are in good positions, they're going to be able to start using this very disruptive, very powerful technology to drive whatever positive outcomes they're looking to drive. And the organizations that aren't in a position to do that are going to be left behind.
Well, and to that point, Dustin, I feel like, you know, there's definitely fear of missing out that comes along with generative AI. There's a lot of fear about actually using it. Those things cut both ways. The fact of the matter is, it's a revolution that's happening right now, and it's happening whether it's governed or not. We all saw the story about the Samsung executive who went out and asked questions of an LLM and inadvertently trained the LLM with private data, and that was in an attempt to do good. That person was attempting to do a really good job, and so yes, there is a tremendous opportunity to do better as an institution, to educate more people, to serve more of the world. There are definitely scary things about it, where you could inadvertently introduce bias. But the fact of the matter is, it's happening right now. And if I had any urging that I could give to this group, whether it's with Microsoft or any other technology company, now is the time to really take a look at what your stance is as an organization, and not just inform yourselves, but help inform the world about how we should responsibly be working in the fields that you develop, that you train us in, that you bring us along to do. The technology is here, and whether it's inside your institution or as you matriculate people out into their places of work or back into academia, we're looking to higher education as a partner to help us figure out how to do this responsibly.
Now, I knew the toughest part of my job this afternoon would be to end the conversation. And I know we could go, this is the quickest hour I think I've spent on a webinar. I mean, it's just some fantastic insights and really provocative conversation from both the panelists and from the audience. But let me wrap it up real quickly. Usually I ask for a prediction. I think we've pretty much made it clear that no one can predict. So let me ask each of you, what is your hope that when we have this webinar in 3 years, where we will have progressed from this point? Melissa, I'll put you on the hot seat first on that one. Your hope.
I hope that we won't have as many questions. That's what I hope, is that we have the education out there, that we have the communities out there, that we're talking to one another, that we don't have to have these sorts of webinars. We don't have to talk about the realities because we're talking to one another. We have the education, all of that. That is my hope, that we've come to kind of a flat line. I don't know. Change.
Baseline, yeah.
I don't need a lot of change from here on out.
Dustin, how about for yourself? Hope.
I think one of the things that I really hope that we're doing here in the next 2, 3, or 4 years is that the conversation has moved beyond well, why should we use AI, to how can we be using AI? And I just look back over my career, and I remember having conversations with customers about well, why cloud? And that conversation has shifted, right? Most every organization now has a cloud strategy, right? A multi-cloud strategy. We're going to do these things over here. We're going to use this thing, and so it's great that we don't have those conversations as much anymore about why cloud. But maybe when cloud, and how should we do things in cloud? And I hope the same thing happens with AI, that we move beyond these. Okay, well, why should we even be using the AI? To how can we use how can we innovate in this space? That's my personal hope.
Great. And Eason, we'll leave you with the last word.
I hope that in 3 years, artificial intelligence is used to benefit every human being on the face of the planet, regardless of where you live, the color of your skin, your economic background, your religious background, that it's reached every discipline of higher education, every corner of the world, and improved the quality of life of all of humanity. And it hasn't been an exclusive revolution for a small group of people.
Fantastic stuff. So I do see that our time is up. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank our panel today for a really very informative presentation. And again, thank all the audience members for your joining in as well. Just a really great back and forth.